There's a new way to play Magnus, and it's all about his Shockwave ability. Hi, I'm Torte, and I'm sure you already know how game-changing Magnus' ultimate ability, Reverse Polarity, can be. But this new way to play him outside of his initiation gives him more to do around fights, strong farming capabilities at a much faster pace, and amps up his damage across the board. While the Harpoon build for Magnus is still popular because it scales so well, and its ganking potential by literally harpooning your target and then skewering them to finish them off, this Shockwave Magic Build alleviates all your mana issues when spamming Shockwave, and you pressure incredibly well during fights, even when you can't engage yet with Reverse Polarity. And you achieve all this with just 3 items: Blink Dagger, Aghs, and Kaya Yasha. By the way, for educational content, definitely like and subscribe. In 7.36 and 7.37c, the developers changed Shockwave and its level 10 talent to deal even more slow at max level than before. This shifted an otherwise physical damage dealing Magnus into an early game magic damage dealer with max Shockwave. With the current meta leaning towards early to mid game fights, Magnus has also sought to keep up with the pace of a match with as few items as possible. So typically you now see a Magnus player rush Blink Dagger first to then start regularly ganking with coordinated teammates. And this is important because Magnus relies on these successful ganks to get his Aghanim shard quickly and start farming for the rest of his items: Kaya, Yasha Kaya, Black King Bar, and Refresher's Orb. Now the value of Aghs shard is twofold. 1, it hits and slows enemies a second time for 75% of the initial 300 damage when the Shockwave returns, and 2, it increases the range of the ability. So farming creep camps or lane creeps is much more efficient, but what's more is that you can spam Shockwave in a fight, dealing a ton of damage from a very safe distance before you are ready to initiate with Reverse Polarity and Skewer. And Shockwave has a lot of scaling opportunity too. At level 10, you can slow targets for an additional 0.75 seconds twice since you are buying the Aghs shard, and at level 20, you have the Shockwave talent dealing an additional 125 Shockwave damage. Again, that also increases the 75% damage dealt when the Shockwave returns back to you with Aghs shard. Kaya and subsequently Kaya and Yasha play into that even more by again increasing the damage you deal with Shockwave as well as your other abilities. It also improves your mana regeneration and evidently mana pool through the intelligence based item components. What's more is that cast speed bonus means all your abilities are much easier to land and less possible for the enemy to dodge. It doesn't hurt that Magnus is a universal attribute hero, so the stats from Yasha and Kaya are definitely suited for the hero too. The reason why Yasha and Kaya is preferred over, say, Kaya and Sanj for Magnus is because he already comes with a slow resistance of 50% with his innate ability Solid Core. During the laning stage, you play relatively safe and rely on Shockwave to secure the range creep against the enemies. Items like Bracer and Null Talisman help beef up your last hitting power since you're a universal attribute hero, but also give you a bit better survivability and mana pool so you can afford to regularly Shockwave when need be, and maybe throw in a Skewer if the opportunity arises for a swift kill. Now, as mentioned, once you finish the laning stage and have secured a Blink Dagger, start regularly ganking the map with your supports and a Smoke of Deceit. Even if Reverse Polarity is not up, blinking onto your targets and skewering them towards your allies and finishing them off with Shockwave should be sufficient most of the time. You are using these successful ganks to farm kills and secure gold to afford Aghs shard. Don't forget that Skewer deals additional damage when passing through trees or hitting cliffs. Cliffs also include those weird things like the Lotus Fountain or the Crystal Junk near dire safe lanes, so just know that there are always so-called cliffs nearby for you. Leading into the late game, you use Max Empower and Aghs shard Max Shockwave to farm creeps to reach Kaya and Yasha to eventually afford Black King Bar. The big key is to guarantee Reverse Polarity and Skewer without being interrupted. Don't forget to use Empower on your carry to give them more damage. So in summary, this new version of Magnus comes online much earlier than the Harpoon build you probably knew of Magnus. The trade-off is that Magnus is massively more susceptible to dying, and it relies on you doing a lot with the very little you have when you first rush Blink Dagger. Once you get over the first hump of successful ganks, it's smooth sailing as Magnus grabs his Aghs shard and Kaya and starts mowing down creep waves incredibly quickly for his last items to wrap up the game. Worst comes to worst, get a Refresher Orb and even Aghanim Scepter when the match is lasting way too long. By the way, with this build, Magnus also no longer becomes a frontliner, but rather a hero that bides his time outside of a fight, spamming Shockwave before jumping in with Reverse Polarity and Skewer. So don't feel pressured to jump in until you know you can change the tide of a fight.